My daughter-in-law said I wasn't officially invited to the wedding after spending $100,000 on it, so I smiled, let the music play, and ended the night with one quiet transaction. It started 3 weeks before the wedding on a quiet Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen checking the RSVP list for the rehearsal dinner when I got the message. It came from Madison, my daughter-in-law, and it was short, sharp, and carefully written to sound polite. Hi, Barbara. Just wanted to clarify that we're keeping the guest list very tight for the ceremony itself. We're going with the photographer's suggestion to keep the front rows reserved only for immediate bridal family. But you're welcome to attend the reception later, if you'd like. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, rereading it, not because I didn't understand, but because I couldn't believe she had written it that way. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from, and if you're loving these stories. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. After everything I had done, paying for the dress, the venue deposit, the flowers, and even the 3-tier cake from that overpriced boutique bakery she insisted on, I was being unofficially disinvited from the ceremony. I didn't respond right away. I thought maybe I had misread her tone. Maybe it was just a clumsy way of saying they were over capacity. So I waited. I gave it 24 hours, then called my son Ryan. He picked up, sounding distracted. Hey, Mom, can I call? You back? We're in the middle of a cake tasting. I got a message from Madison, I said, about the wedding seating. There was a pause. How long? Just long enough to feel heavy. Yeah, Ryan said slowly. It's nothing personal. It's just that Madison's parents have a lot of relatives coming in from out of town. You know how big her family is, and mine isn't. Keepin', my voice as steady as I could. Come on, Mom, he sighed. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. You're still invited to the reception. I didn't say anything. I just listened to his silence fill the space where an apology should have gone. We really appreciate everything you've done, he added quickly. And this isn't about money. It's about keeping the energy light and drama-free on the day, you understand, right? I understand, I said. And I hung up. For the next few days, I kept quiet. I didn't say anything to friends. I didn't post about it. I just kept confirming vendor payments. My name was on every single invoice, from the photographer's travel costs to the DJ deposit. I had spent $100,000 across 10 months, all from the inheritance I received after my late husband passed. Ryan and Madison didn't know that. They just thought I had savings, and maybe I did. But that money was never meant to buy my exclusion. The week of the wedding, the florist called me in a panic. Madison had requested a full redesign of the bouquet and centerpieces. White lilies were out. She wants blush peonies now, the florist said. She said you'd approve it. I did. I sent the extra payment. I didn't argue. On Friday afternoon, the day of the rehearsal dinner, I arrived early to the estate. I wasn't listed among the VIPs. Okay, my seat had no name card. I asked one of the staff if I could just wait outside near the rose garden, and she nodded politely. Of course, ma'am. I watched from a distance as Madison's family arrived in groups, her mother in a tailored cream suit, hugging every guest like a celebrity matriarch. Her father shaking hands with the photographer and videographer. Her siblings taking selfies by the fountain. No one looked at me. I had done the floral layout for that garden, paid extra for it to be pruned and restructured before the ceremony. But I stayed behind the line of shrubs like an extra in a movie I funded but was never cast in. Madison walked past me at one point. She was laughing with her maid of honor, a girl I didn't recognize. I caught her eye for a brief moment. She nodded at me. Not a greeting, not warmth. Just a tight nod, like I was one of the staff. Ryan didn't approach me either. He was too busy managing groomsmen and directing seating. He looked happy, stressfully happy, the kind that comes with wanting things to look perfect. He looked like a man who didn't want his mother in the frame. Later that evening, I sat in the small inn I had booked myself 2 miles away from the venue. Madison had offered to arrange lodging for her family, but not for me. I didn't complain. I brought a bottle of wine and ordered room service. I watched a rerun of a show Ryan and I used to watch when he was a teenager. It didn't feel nostalgic. It felt distant. That night, I pulled out the spreadsheet I had kept since the start of their engagement. Every payment, every vendor contact, every agreement was there, organized, color-coded, meticulous. I double-checked the contract for the house 6 months earlier. I had transferred ownership of the second property I inherited a vacation. Home in their name. Madison cried when I gave them the keys. "This means so much," she had said, hugging me, her voice shaky with gratitude. "You're giving us a future." And I did. I gave it freely. Now I opened a folder I had kept, locked in my safe. It contained a clause, one that allowed me to reverse the property transfer if I proved financial misrepresentation or undue influence within the first year. The clause was written by my lawyer. I hadn't told Ryan or Madison. They had signed it during a dinner I hosted, buried in a stack of refinance documents. They asked me to co-sign. I had read every page. They hadn't. At noon on the day of the wedding, I dressed quietly. Simple navy blue dress, soft heels, no jewelry except my wedding band. I didn't wear makeup, didn't bring a +1. I got in my car and drove. Back to the estate. At the front gate, the valet checked the list. "Name?" he asked. "Barbara Langley," I said. He looked at his tablet and hesitated. "I don't see you on the primary list. Are you part of the reception staff?" I smiled. "No, but that's all right. I'm not here to stay long." The ceremony had already started. I heard the music playing. I stood at the edge of the lawn under the shade of a sycamore tree. It's far enough not to be noticed, close enough to see everything. Madison walked down the aisle. The crowd stood and clapped. Ryan beamed. They kissed. The guests cheered. I watched it all, the moment I had paid for. It's the memories they would frame on their walls without being invited to take part in it. When it was over and the guests moved to the cocktail hour, I walked to the manager's office quietly. I handed her a sealed letter. "Please make sure this reaches the newlyweds sometime after the cake cutting." I said. She nodded, confused, but didn't ask questions. Inside the envelope were 3 things. A copy of the property reversal clause, signed and dated. A formal notice of intent to revoke the house deed transfer. A handwritten note. "You erased me from the ceremony, so I've erased the part you never truly valued. The future I gave you now returns to me." I didn't stay for the music. I didn't wait for their reaction. Walked to my car and drove home. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just felt finished. The wedding reception was already underway when I got back to the small inn. I didn't check my phone. Didn't turn on the TV. I took off my shoes, hung my dress on the closet door, and sat on the edge of the bed for a long while without moving. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was something flatter, a quiet acceptance that I had already lost Ryan long before Madison came into the picture. She just finished the job. I didn't expect anything to happen that night. The letter I left with the venue manager wasn't meant to cause a scene. I had specifically instructed for it to be delivered only after the cake cutting, when the music was loud, and people were too distracted to pay attention to the bride and groom reading anything. I wasn't looking to embarrass them. Just correct something that had gone too far. Around 10:30 p.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I let it ring. Then it rang again. Madison's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. 3 minutes later, Ryan called. I didn't answer that either. The next message came from Madison. It was short. "What the hell is this?" Then another. "Is this some kind of joke?" I got up, went into the bathroom, and let the faucet run. While I washed my face, could feel the tension in my shoulders, but it wasn't from guilt. I had read and reread the property clause before I sent it. I had acted within my legal rights. And more importantly, I had acted after being treated like an afterthought. At midnight, I sent one reply. "Please direct all future questions to my attorney. His contact info is in the envelope." I didn't sleep well, but I didn't feel regret, just a hollow kind of relief. I had drawn a line. I had finally answered the unspoken message I'd been getting for months. You don't matter. The next morning, I drove back to my house, the one I still lived in, not the one I had almost given away to them. The mail was piled at the door. The neighbor's cat was asleep on my porch chair. Nothing had changed. That was the point. Madison and Ryan had built an entire future on the assumption that I would keep giving. They never thought I would stop. But I had. 2 days passed before I heard from Ryan again. Showed up unannounced, knocking on my front door around 8 p.m. On a Tuesday, I didn't know he was coming. He never texted. I opened the door slowly. He looked tired. Still in the white shirt from his office job, sleeves rolled, tie shoved into his back pocket. His hair was a mess, and he hadn't shaved. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and stepped aside. He didn't sit down. He stood in the middle of my living room like he didn't know what to do with himself. "I just want to understand," he said finally. "Why you'd do this? Why now?" I looked at him for a moment before answering. "You mean why I'd take back the house?" He nodded. "Yes, after everything, after giving it to us, after we started planning our lives around it." I didn't take it back out of nowhere, I said calmly. "I left that clause in for a reason. And I used it after being excluded from the ceremony I paid for." He looked confused for a second, like it hadn't even occurred to him that I would be hurt. "By that, you were at the reception," he said. "You were welcome to that." I raised my eyebrows. "Do you hear how that sounds?" "I didn't mean it that way," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. We thought it would be less complicated. You and Madison, you thought it would be easier to pretend I wasn't part of it," I interrupted. "You thought you could take what I gave, smile for the pictures, and leave me off to the side like some distant aunt who sent a gift and stayed home." He looked down. "Did you think I wouldn't notice I was being erased?" I asked. "She didn't mean it like that." "Yeah," mumbled. "Then she should have said that when she wrote the message." I said. "Yeah, she should have said it when she asked me for another $4,000 to cover the upgraded photographer. She should have said it when she told the florist to change the flowers again and said I'd pay." He didn't argue. He just stood there. "The house was a gift," I said, "but it was given in good faith. When that disappeared, so did the gift." "I don't know how to explain this to Madison," he said after a long silence. "That's your problem to solve," I replied, "not mine." He finally sat down, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "I didn't think you'd go through with it," he said quietly. "I thought you'd be mad, but not this." "The thing about people like me," I said, sitting across from him. "We don't always scream. We just stop. And when we stop, it's final." He looked up at me, his expression tired and unsure. "I didn't want this to happen," he said. "I just wanted to start my life with her. You could have done that," I replied. "You just didn't have to step on me to do it." He didn't stay long. He stood up after a few more minutes, thanked me for talking, and left without asking for anything else. That surprised me. The old Ryan, the one before Madison, would have argued, but this version of him just looked worn out. Maybe he finally saw what had happened. That night, I opened the kitchen cabinet and pulled out the wedding invitation I had kept. It was still in its envelope, untouched, unopened. I hadn't had the stomach to look at it back then. Now I did. Inside was a printed card, elegant and heavy. "Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Miller request the honor of your presence." Not one mention of me, not even as mother of the groom. It wasn't a mistake. I folded it back and put it in the drawer with the documents from the lawyer. A reminder. The next morning, I got a call from Madison. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was tight, controlled. "Barbara, I think we should talk. This has gone too far. Can figure something out, maybe a compromise. Please call me." That's what she called it when I paid for her dress and let her act like she picked it herself. That's what she called it when she told people her family paid for the wedding and never corrected them. When they believed it, I didn't call her back. Later that week, the property transfer completed. My attorney confirmed it by email. The vacation home was now back in my name. Ryan and Madison would receive formal notice to vacate within 60 days unless they made other arrangements. I expected another phone call, but this time, none came. Instead, I got a delivery, a box left on my doorstep. Inside was the set of dishes I had given them as a wedding present. A short note was taped to the lid. "We appreciate everything you've done, but it's clear this relationship is no longer working. No greeting. No signature." I placed the box in the garage. That night, I sat on the porch and thought about how things had gotten here. I thought about the Christmases I hosted, the birthdays I paid for, the college tuition bills I helped cover without being asked. I remembered how Ryan used to call me 3 times a week when he moved out for school. How he used to say I was the only parent who ever really listened. And then I thought about that wedding, the one I funded but didn't belong to. It's the one where I stood behind a tree while other people toasted the bride's family for making this all possible. They never realized I was even there, but they would remember. I was the one who paid for it, and they'd remember I was the one who took it back. 3 days after the letter, delivered at the wedding, and 2 days after Ryan came to my house, I received a call from my attorney, Mark Hollings. His voice was steady and efficient, the way it always was. "It's done," he said. "The property transfer is complete. The deed has officially been returned to your name. You are the sole legal owner again." I didn't celebrate. I just nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thank you," I said. "Please go ahead and send the occupancy notice. 60 days, no extensions." "Understood." He paused for a moment before adding, "I don't say this often, Barbara, but this was a smart move. Too many people let emotional pressure push them into irreversible mistakes." "I already made one," I said. "This is just correcting it." We ended the call, and I sat in silence for a moment, letting the words settle. I had expected to feel more, maybe satisfaction, maybe something sharp. But I didn't. It just felt necessary, like closing a door that had been swinging open too long. The next day, the notice was delivered to Ryan and Madison's mailbox at the vacation house. It was hand-signed, notarized, and attached with a second letter from me. Not a legal one, just personal. "Please remove your belongings and return the house keys by the end of the 60-day period. I will not pursue legal action if the property is vacated peacefully. No further communication is necessary." Barbara Langley. That same evening, Madison called. I didn't answer. She tried again the next morning, then again after lunch. Then she stopped calling altogether and started emailing instead. The email started professionally subject. "Property status, Barbara, we received your notice. I would appreciate it if we could meet to discuss a mutual solution that doesn't result in either side losing face. Please let me know a time that works." Then came the follow-up. Less polite. Subject. "Reconsideration. I think this is extremely unfair considering the amount of time and money we've invested in the home. Surely you can see how disruptive this is." And finally, the last one, short and clipped. Subject. "Next steps. Understood. We'll make arrangements. Keys will be returned once our items are packed." I didn't respond to any of them. Mark did. He simply confirmed the date and reminded them the house would be inspected. Once vacated, his tone was precise and legal. Mine had already said everything that needed saying. About a week after that, my neighbor from across the street, Carol, dropped by. She held a casserole dish and had a strange, concerned look on her face. "I saw Ryan the other day," she said as I let her in. "At the grocery store. He looked rough." I shrugged. "I'm sure he is." She set the dish down and hesitated. "I didn't want to pry, but he said you took the house back." "The lake one." I nodded. "I did." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't comment. She sat down at my kitchen table like she always had when we were younger moms together, when our boys were in school and we still thought we were raising them into men who'd never disappoint us. "You don't have to explain anything," she said eventually. I know it must have taken a lot to do that. Ito, exactly what they gave me, I replied. Nothing. She looked at me for a second, nodded, and then slid the casserole dish closer. Chicken and rice. I figured you wouldn't feel like cooking. I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in days. Thanks. The truth was, I hadn't felt like doing much of anything. Not out of sadness that had passed. What replaced it was something more practical. I started going through old documents. I updated my will. I removed Ryan as emergency contact and instead listed my niece, Allison, a nurse in Denver who actually visited me twice last year without asking for money. I even made a trip to the vacation house 2 weeks after the notice had been served. Ryan and Madison weren't there, but I still had the master key. I walked through the place slowly, taking mental notes. The rooms were still filled with their belongings. A couch Madison had ordered, the bar stools they picked out together, his college trophies on the bookshelf, but it didn't feel like their home. It felt like a hotel room that had been over-decorated. Nothing about it felt earned. Everything had been placed there for show. The wedding photos on the mantel, me, nowhere in them. The expensive glassware in the kitchen, still with price stickers on the bottom. And the guest room, completely untouched, like no one had ever stayed in it. I locked the door behind me when I left. Would be mine again soon. 2 days later, I got a text from Ryan. We're moving out on the 10th. Madison says to expect the keys by mail. No apology. No explanation. Just logistics. That night, I sat in my living room, flipping through an old photo album I hadn't touched in years. Pictures of Ryan as a baby, smiling with food on his face. Ryan at 8, dressed as a pirate for Halloween. Ryan at 15, standing next to me on the porch after I surprised him with his first cell phone. His arms were around me in half those pictures. He used to look at me like I was the most important person in the world. Now I was just the woman who took his house back. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. I hadn't lost him last week. I hadn't even lost him during the wedding. I had lost him slowly over time, one decision at a time, as he let Madison set the tone, set the rules, set the distance. The wedding was just the last proof of how far I'd fallen off their map. The next weekend, Carol and I had coffee on the porch. She asked gently, "Do you think you'll ever speak to him again?" I shook my head. I don't know. Maybe one day. But I'm not going to chase after someone who told me in every way that matters that I don't belong. She nodded. I think you did the right thing. I know I did, I said. I didn't do it to hurt them. I did it to stop being hurt by them. 2 days later, a small padded envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside were the house keys. No note. Just the keys and a folded copy of the mailbox code. I put them in a drawer right next to the wedding invitation I had never sent back. I had no plans to sell the house yet. I didn't need the money. What I needed was to know it wasn't being used as a reward for disrespect. I'd let too much slide. I wasn't going to let this be another silent loss. The wedding may have moved on without me, but they wouldn't move into their future using what? I gave not without consequence. It took Ryan and Madison 22 days to vacate the Housemark kept me updated as their attorney sent brief, formal responses to confirm they were complying with the notice. There were no complaints, no threats, no last-minute attempts to negotiate. But the silence wasn't out of respect. It was pride. They didn't want to give me the satisfaction of knowing I had one. I didn't need that satisfaction. I already had the house. On the 10th day after their move, Mark and I drove up to the lake property for inspection. I hadn't been inside since my last quiet walkthrough, but this time was different. It was official. The house was mine again in every sense. Madison's kitchenware was gone. Ryan's trophies too. The bar stools had been replaced with the plain wooden ones that originally came with the home. Mark walked through each room with a clipboard. No damage, no disputes. Honestly, cleaner than I expected. I stayed in the living room looking. At the empty fireplace, the wedding photo was gone. The mantel was bare again. They left behind a few items in the garage, Mark added. Old winter coats, a folding table. You want them boxed and shipped? No, I said. Tell them they have 30 days to claim them. After that, it'll be donated. He nodded, making a note as he moved through the rest of the inspection. I stepped out to the patio. The lake shimmered quietly in the afternoon light. The sound of birds, wind, nothing else. For a few minutes, I just stood there breathing. Not heavy with emotion, just calm. This wasn't revenge. I wasn't celebrating. Why we locked the house, and Mark handed me the final signed form. Congratulations, he said. It's clean, fully yours. No pending issues. Thank you, I said, folding the document and putting it in my bag. Let's keep it that way. On the drive back, I didn't say much. Mark didn't push conversation. We knew this wasn't the end of something dramatic. It was just closure, a necessary form of it. But later that evening, as I was folding laundry at home, got a call I didn't expect. It was Madison's father. Hello, Barbara. This is Thomas Miller. I hadn't spoken to him since the engagement dinner. I hope I'm not intruding. I kept my voice neutral. No, not at all. What can I do for you? He cleared his throat. I just wanted to speak, woman to woman, about all this unpleasantness. That choice of words told me everything I needed to know. Unpleasantness, I repeated. Yes, Look, I know things have gotten tense. I understand you've taken some measures, and my daughter is understandably very upset. She had 60 days, I replied calmly. That was generous. He hesitated, then added, Ryan's always spoken highly of you. He told me you were fair, reasonable. I just thought, perhaps there's room for dialogue. This isn't about dialogue, Mr. Miller, I said. It's about boundaries. Ones that weren't respected for too long. He didn't respond. Immediately. When he did, the tone was slightly more guarded. I just hope this doesn't divide the family permanently. Weddings are stressful. Emotions run high. I'm sure Madison didn't intend to make you feel excluded. She didn't make me feel excluded. She excluded me. He paused, then gave a short sigh. Well, that's your choice. I'll respect it. Good, I said, and ended the call. I stared at the phone for a moment before setting it down. I wasn't angry, just amazed at how far people would go to soften the truth when it didn't suit them. They wanted to erase what happened, or at least smooth it over just enough so they didn't have to acknowledge what they had done. Later that night, I sat at my desk with a stack of papers in front of me, copies of invoices, a printout of the wedding budget, all color-coded and annotated my original records from before the ceremony. I hadn't looked through them in a while. There it all was, line by line. $14,000. Venue deposit, $9,200. Floral design and delivery, $6,500. Catering prepayment, $4,300. Dress. Alterations, custom veil, $3,800. DJ sound setup. Rehearsal coordination, $1,950. Transportation for guests. And that wasn't even the full list. I had funded the whole event, almost in full. And now they wanted to label me as difficult for stepping back. I placed the papers into a folder and labeled it with a single word, closed, the next day. I received another email from Ryan. This one wasn't about the house. It wasn't long, just a few lines. Subject, moving forward, I don't want us to stop talking permanently. I know things went badly. I don't expect you to forgive everything overnight, but I hope eventually we can talk, even if just as family. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to hear from him, but because I didn't know if he really meant it. Not yet. I printed the email and slipped it into the same folder. Maybe one day I'd open it again, but not today. A week passed. No more messages, no visits, no late-night calls. No drama, silence. For the first time in months, it wasn't tense or uncertain. It was just quiet. I used that time to rest, to take walks, to call people I hadn't spoken to in years. I cleaned out closets and donated boxes of clothes. I deleted photos from my phone. I didn't need to keep ones from the wedding, the rehearsal dinner, the floral meetings. I didn't need reminders of a day that excluded me once morning. While drinking coffee on my porch, I looked out at the yard and realized something. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an apology, not for recognition, not for my son to come back. I had done what needed to be done. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. They had every chance to treat me with basic respect. And they chose not to. That wasn't my burden anymore. It had been just under 2 months since Ryan and Madison vacated the lake house. The keys were returned, the property inspected, the silence sustained. My days had fallen into a new rhythm. Coffee early, walks around the neighborhood, reading on the back patio, some volunteer work at the local library twice a week. Nothing extravagant. It's just a kind of stillness I hadn't known in a long time. Then, on a Tuesday morning, I got a text from Carol. Thought you'd want to know, saw Madison's sister post something. They're having a second reception next weekend. Looks like it's at the same house. I blinked at the screen and read it again. Same house. I opened the link Carol sent. It was a post from someone named Caitlin, Madison's younger sister. The photo showed an invitation card that read, "Join us for an evening of celebration. A second reception in honor of Madison and Ryan Miller. New beginnings, new memories." The address was listed clearly. My lake house. They were trying to throw another party in a house they no longer owned. I called Mark immediately. Can they even do that? I asked. They can't, he said flatly. They are no longer on the title. They have no lease, no legal claim, no occupancy rights. If they try, they're trespassing. They must think I won't show up. Or that I won't notice. I said. Mark was silent for a beat. Then he said, "Do you want to handle this quietly or make it very clear they crossed a line?" "Both," I replied. Over the next few days, I worked with Mark to draft a formal cease and desist notice, along with a second legal warning stating that any use of the property for personal or private events without permission would constitute unlawful entry. We agreed on a delivery method that couldn't be ignored. Physical courier. Signature required. 3 days before the scheduled event. Madison signed for the envelope. We knew because the courier service sent us a photo of her holding it. She wore sunglasses and looked annoyed. Ryan wasn't in the image. The day of the event came. I hadn't heard a word from either of them since the delivery. No email, no text, no apology. But Carol had kept her eyes on social media. Just before noon, she sent me a screenshot of a captioned post. "Final prep before the reception tonight. Can't wait to celebrate properly with everyone who actually matters." Underneath it, a row of heart emojis and clapping hands. I didn't get angry. I didn't shake. Simply got dressed. I wore black slacks, a light blue blouse, and flats. Nothing dramatic. I didn't wear jewelry. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I didn't need company. I just needed a set of keys and a folder. I prepared in advance. At 6:10 p.m., I pulled into the driveway of my own lake house. There were already 6 cars parked in the small gravel area. Balloons tied to the front fence. A white tent set up on the lawn. Soft jazz music coming from inside. Voices and laughter spilling from the back deck. I got out of the car slowly. No one noticed me at first. I walked around to the side gate and let myself in. Everything was just as I remembered, except filled with people I didn't recognize. They had wine glasses in hand. Some were already eating. A photographer was snapping pictures of a couple near the lake. A setup with props that read Mr. and Mrs. Forever. I stepped through the sliding glass door into the living room. Madison was standing near the kitchen island in a cream dress, holding a champagne flute, laughing. Ryan stood beside her, looking stiff, glancing often at the clock on the wall. It took them a few seconds to see me. When they did, Madison froze. Ryan's face dropped immediately. "Barbara," Madison said tightly, "what are you doing here?" "I own this house," I said. "You were notified not to use it." Phew. People nearby paused their conversations. Madison stepped closer, lowering her voice. "This isn't the time or place. This is exactly the time and place," I interrupted. "This party is illegal. You were warned. You acknowledged receipt of that warning, and yet here you are." "Ken, We please step outside?" Ryan asked, clearly trying to contain things. "Just you and me, not here." I nodded once. We walked out to the side yard. He turned to me, already defensive. "Look, I know we overstepped. I thought if it was just for a few hours, you thought wrong." I cut in. "You don't get to rewrite the rules because you're uncomfortable with the consequences." He rubbed his face. "It's just a party, Mom." "No," I said. "It's not. It's a statement. Another one. It's just like the wedding. It's just like the silence. You think you can do what you want and I'll either pay for it or pretend it didn't happen." He shook his head. "We weren't trying to. You erased me from your wedding, gave you a home, and you treated it like a prop I took it back, and now you're using it again like nothing happened? That ends tonight." He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. "I've already called the sheriff," I said. "They'll be here shortly to explain the legal side. You have 10 minutes to clear this place out." His face hardened. "You're seriously doing this? Should have done it months ago." I turned and walked back into the house. Madison was waiting in the hallway, arms crossed. "You're humiliating yourself," she hissed. "No," I said simply. "I'm protecting what's mine." The photographer was already packing up by the time I stepped onto the deck. Carol had arrived by then, standing by the gate with 2 deputies. They had calm, practiced expressions, not surprised, just doing their job. It took 23 minutes to clear the house. Ryan tried to keep people calm. Madison refused to look at me again. Several of her relatives muttered things under their breath as they passed, carrying wine glasses and purses. I stood silently by the front door, watching them leave one by one when the last guest stepped out. I closed the door and locked it. The deputies confirmed everything was handled. No charges would be filed as long as no further entry was made. Madison and Ryan left without saying another word. Carol came up beside me. "You okay?" I nodded. "I'm fine." "Did it feel good?" she asked. "No," I said, "but it felt necessary." I stayed at the house that night, brought a small bag, made a simple dinner, and watched the lake through the bedroom window. The house was quiet again. For the first time in months, it belonged to me. Not just legally, but fully. I didn't take joy in the silence, but I felt peace. The morning after the second reception was shut down, I woke up at the lake house before the sun had fully risen. The air was cold, still. I made coffee in the quiet kitchen, sat at the breakfast table, and watched the light climb slowly over the water. I didn't feel triumphant. I wasn't replaying the night before like some dramatic victory. I was just there, grounded, present, and very much done with all of it. By 9 a.m., I had finished packing up the few things I brought with me. The folder from my attorney, a change of clothes, and a notebook where I'd been listing everything I no longer needed to hold on to, physically or emotionally. I walked one last time through the house, room by room. It was clean, uncluttered, empty of the things that had once belonged to Ryan and Madison. It didn't feel like a place of pain. It felt neutral. Mine again. Then I drove back to my primary home and called Mark. "I want to sell it," I said, quietly. "No online listings, no showings. Just a private buyer if we can." He didn't ask why. "I'll get in touch with someone. You'll have an offer in less than 10 days. True to his word, I did by the end of the following week. I sat across from a woman named Denise, mid-50s, just retired, looking for a quiet lakefront property to settle into after a long career. She brought her daughter with her to the showing. A young woman in her 20s who kept pointing out little details she loved. They were kind, respectful. They asked real questions. They weren't trying to impress me. They were just grateful. The house was even available. I signed the paperwork a few days later. It was a clean transaction. No emotions. No second thoughts. Mark called to confirm the funds had been wired and the deed finalized. "It's closed," he said. "All of it." I thanked him. Then I hung up, walked out to my backyard, and sat on the bench under the old maple tree. No one knew where I was. No one needed anything from me. The phone stayed silent. That evening, As I cooked dinner, I finally opened the last box that had been sitting in my garage for weeks, the one Madison had returned after I reclaimed the house. Inside were the wedding dishes I had gifted them, still wrapped in tissue, unused. I unwrapped one of the dinner plates and held it for a moment. Then I placed it in the kitchen cabinet with the others. I didn't need to return it. I didn't need to break it. I just absorbed the fact that something meant to symbolize permanence was never really touched. A few days later, Rand called again. I saw his name on the screen but didn't pick up. Then the voicemail came. "Hi, Mom. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know we crossed a line. I know I didn't stand up for you when I should have. And I know Madison made things worse, but I let it happen. I just kept thinking you'd be fine no matter what. That you didn't need anything, but that wasn't fair. Anyway, I understand if you don't want to talk, but I wanted you to hear that from me." I listened to it once. Then again, I didn't cry, but I did sit with it for a long time, letting each word settle. He sounded different, worn down, maybe, honest, more than he had in years. I didn't call him back, not yet, maybe someday, but I wasn't ready to be pulled back into their version of family, where I was expected to give endlessly and ask for nothing. I wasn't going to go back to being grateful. For scraps of attention or proximity, they had made it clear, time and time again, that I was only valued when convenient. And I had finally, definitively, removed myself from that position. A week after the sale closed, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address, just my name and street. I opened it slowly. It was from Madison. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. The tone measured. "Barbara, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to say I was wrong. About the wedding, about the house, about how we treated you. You didn't deserve it. I think I let the pressure of planning everything get to me, and I wanted control over things I had no right to take. I won't pretend I can undo it. But I wanted to write this because I know I made things worse, and because I finally understand why you walked away. Madison, I." Folded the letter and placed it with the others in the closed folder. I didn't reply. But for the first time since all of it began, I felt a small shift inside, not a door opening, but a draft of something softer. They could rebuild their lives however they chose. I wasn't going to be part of the foundation anymore. I had paid for their wedding, their photos, their celebration, and then, when I was erased, I made sure they couldn't keep. What wasn't earned, it wasn't loud, it wasn't vengeful. It was a transaction. One final correction, and it was done.